So in 1.6, this section, we're going to talk about other types of equations. So there's kind of a bunch of different kinds, but we'll talk about them individually. And there's kind of like, okay, we have linear equations, we have quadratic equations, we've dealt with those. These are just some other types of equations. Okay, the first kind we're going to work on are polynomial equations. So when we had something like, x squared plus 7x plus 6 equals 0, we worked on those. We solved those. That's called a quadratic equation, which is also a polynomial equation because a quadratic is a polynomial, right? Okay. But now what we're going to do is have a higher power. So the degree is going to be higher. Like maybe it'll be a third degree or a fourth degree. In this section, when we're working with those polynomial functions or equations and we're solving them, we're going to solve them with factoring, okay? There might be other things involved. We'll have to wait and see. But we have other methods for solving higher degree polynomials, but not in this chapter, okay? So we'll just use the methods that we know here. Okay, so that's probably all confusing. So our example here says solve by factoring. Okay, so they tell us to factor. What you want to do is set it to 0. So set to 0. So I'm going to say 3x to the 4th minus 27x squared equals 0. So just like with a quadratic equation, if you're going to solve by factoring, you set it to 0. And then here I'm going to have what's called a GCF. So I'm going to factor that left-hand side. So I'm going to pull out a 3x squared, and then I'll have x squared minus 9, right? Okay. Let's see, anything else I want to do there? I can check it. So that's 3x to the 4th, and that's 27x squared. Okay. Are we done factoring? Well, no, because this is the difference of squares, so we can still factor more. 3x squared times x plus 3 times x minus 3 equals 0. So you want to factor completely. I'll put that there. And then you're going to set each factor equal to 0. So this is like step 1, step 2. Set each factor equal to 0. Now this should seem familiar because that's how we solved quadratic equations by factoring. Equal to 0. Okay, so 3x squared, that could be 0. X plus 3, that could be 0. Or x minus 3, that could be 0. And then you're going to solve each of those equations. Now, here we get, we can divide by 3, and you get x squared equals 0. If I take the square root of both sides, and I think we talked about that before, yeah, we did, I would put the plus or minus in, but it's 0, so plus you can't have plus or minus 0, it's just 0. So we do get an answer, x equals 0. And then here you'd subtract the 3, and you'd get x equals negative 3. And here you'd add 3, and so you'd get x equals 3. And so there are 3 solutions here. Now, those of you who have maybe done a little more algebra, you might be wondering, it was a 4th degree polynomial. Shouldn't there have been 4 solutions? We'll talk more about that when we talk more about polynomials. Okay. So this equation just has those 3 solutions. You could write it as a set too. If you wanted to write it like something like that, that would be fun.